Welcome to the lecture on model validity and credibility. So, we had in the last lecture discussed about the verification of models. Now, we will see that what are required for the model validity and credibility. Now, we have already understood about the validity and credibility definition. So, if the simulation model is valid, it can be used to make decisions about similar system. So, we say that if it is valid, if you have a similar system and if you do the analysis, if you do the run of the system, the results which you get, you can use it very much for that particular system. So, for similar system like you have done for the simulation of a restaurant, and if you are making another restaurant of even similar type of larger size, but then the same way of working goes on. So, in that case, once you have the valid simulation model which takes into account every assumptions, every input parameters of similar type, then in those cases you can say that the same kind of simulation model, same model, simply you have to change the some of the parameters, like you have the arrays may be changing, number of input parameters that is put in, that will be same, but then the arrays of these parameters may be changing. So, if the size changes, but then the algorithm will be same, you will have similar kind of subroutines, the program will be run and you will get the results. So, that basically is true for when it is decided that yes, it is valid. So, then we say that the program has validity. The ease or difficulty of the validation process depends on the complexity of the system being modeled. The thing is that how much complex you are modeling the system. So, as we discussed that when you have a complex system, in those cases you will have the complex assumptions, you will have to have many assumptions. The assumptions are to be taken into account, and you have to see that the way you take the assumptions, they should simplify the process, the program making. So, the ease or difficulty of the validation process will certainly depend on how much the system complex is. So, whatever be the simulation model of a complex system, actually it can be only an approximation to the actual system. Whatever complexity you arise by taking large amount of assumptions make it complex, but it does not become the real system. It will only be the approximate to the actual system, and it does not mean that if you are taking very complex assumptions, you are going to very close. Many a times you are taking the assumptions which may deviate you from the actual system's performance. So, you will have to say, and also at the same time, if you are taking complex system with complex assumptions, it takes a lot of time. So, it is time consuming, resource consuming. So, that is also not advisable, because if you are, so you have the constraint of time also. If any program takes a large amount of time, because you have to give the results, based on that you have to suggest what needs to be done. So, in that case you need to see that whatever you are getting, the results, whether it is going in the right direction or not. So, it does not, so you have to see that only do not think of making very complex assumptions, because if you face any change at any stage, you can further change certain parameters, certain conditions. Models should be developed for a particular set of purpose. So, the purpose or the objective should be clear in your mind for what you are making the model. So, before starting, when you are simulating any model, the objectives should be clear in mind. Then the model has to be made keeping that objectives in mind, because accordingly you will have to select the input parameters. You will have to see how the subroutine has to be made. So, that objective, once it is clear, then certain, because that is your performance measure, what you are going to achieve. So, once your objectives are clear, you can think of having proper input parameters. Measures of performance used to validate a model should include those to be used for evaluating system designs. So, it is same thing, that your measures of performance should be the one which should tell that for what will be the capacity of this design, what it will do, what will be the main objective of having this system, what are the parameters which you are going to evaluate, what are the confidence intervals which parameter you are going to have the confidence intervals with certain confidence level. So, measures of performance, it must include all those parameters. Then the thing is that validation is not something which should be attempted only for a formality. Many a times we make the program, run it, we get the results, and then we validate in the end. So, that is not the true way of validation or true way of going for simulation. You should validate first against certain reported results or experimental results. So, validation is very important. It should not be taken as if just simply for the sake of something to do you have done it. Before that already the program has run, and then you can say that okay, it has run, it has come something which is okay. Though that is not in true spirit. You will have to have this in mind, that it is very important to validate the model. You have to see that whatever you are going to simulate, whatever you are going to present and you are getting, that is basically the true representation of the work which you are doing. How to establish the credibility? Now, for establishing the credibility, it is required that managers and understanding and agreement is there with the model's assumptions. So, as we discussed earlier, that managers have to be taken into confidence. He must be the one who always should feel that yes, he has been consulted, he was not left alone, because ultimately it is the one, that manager itself, who is going to use that simulation results for doing any necessary changes, for improving the system performance. So, he must be agreeing with the model's assumptions. He must have the full knowledge of what model's assumptions are, what way these assumptions are realistic, what way it is going to help. And if he does not, suppose many times he may say that no, this assumption should be taken in somewhat more complex way, you have to convince him that this is the more realistic kind of assumption which will give us this result. So, ultimately he has to finally give the credit of that, because he will be looking at the final results. So, his understanding and agreement with the model's assumption is important. Demonstration that the model has been validated and verified. So, you must have the demonstration proper, that this is how the model is validated and verified. So, this way it will increase its credibility, then people will have the faith that yes, this model works well. Manager's ownership and involvement with the project. Manager should always feel that he is involved with the project. It is his work, it is his organization which is going to be benefited, and he is the key person to assess this. So, he must have an ownness, and accordingly he should be involved. So, every time he should be approached, every time he is approached basically, then he is very much helpful for the model developers. Whatever help the model developers require in terms of input or so, he is always available. So, it will only come when he feels that this is going to be a good thing for the organization. So, the result which he will get, it will be better. So, that ownership and involvement with the project for the manager has to be there, because in between he will bring few more ideas, few more assumptions which will give even more realistic results. Then reputation of the model developers. What kind of reputation the model developer has? So, that has certainly the link with the credibility of the model, because many a times the team which has worked for many years and which has a good track record, so they actually help, I mean, the person to be convinced that yes, the model which is being made, it will be credible enough. So, if that is so, that helps. Next is that what are the techniques for increasing the model validity and credibility. So, in that the important point is that you have to collect high quality information and data on the system. So, as we know that depending upon the quality of input, you are going to have the output. So, for that you have to have the conversation with experts of the field. The experts in that particular field, that is subject matter experts, they can give you idea that what kind of information you require, what kind of data you require, what are the data you require, which will help you to build the model. So, the conversation with them will be helpful in that. Then collecting data if required from similar system and checking the usefulness of the data. Now, if there is another similar system working, if you have some system which is the similar one which is there, then you can get the data from there. So, that will help you in wasting time for getting the data from other sources, because that is reliable data which is if any system is running. But then you have to be cautious how to use this data. The data may have some different units, data may be of different format, file. Data is not of, some of the data is superfluous, which is to be removed, because many a times if you try to extract certain data from some system, then you may see that some of the data is having no at all relationship with others. So, these things wherever you are copying something from some source or you are taking as it is from some other source, you will have to have a proper check of the data which you are getting. Like there is no error in the data, then it is not biased towards certain things. It is not very much skewed in certain direction. Was it biased for some other reasons? So, all these things are required to be checked when you are taking the data from some source. Many a times, so you should also practice that take the standard distribution function results in most of the cases. So, if they are the ones, and if suppose for inter-arrival rate or service rate or so, you have some standard distribution functions. If you know the mean, you know the results what standard distribution function will give. So, in most of the cases or to the maximum possible, you should use these standard distribution function results. Use the experience and intuition of the modeler. Now, many a times you do not have the data, or you have the data which does not look so authentic, and at many stages you feel to stuck at some place. So, at that time the modeler, his experience and intuition should be used. He is the only one who knows that how his model is going to behave if he gets the data in certain form. So, experience and intuition of the modeler should be also used. Interaction with key personnel on regular basis. This is very important for establishing the validity and credibility of the model, because if you do not interact at regular times, then many a times what happens that your output results which you are getting, that is something different. So, the thing is that the person should be involved in between also. During the program, in the intermediate stages, whenever you are getting some results, there should be regular basis, there should be interaction. So, basically the advantage of this interaction is that during those discussions we discuss about the ongoing assumptions, ongoing results and the future results also. So, when we discuss that during that process, during one-to-one discussion with many experts sitting on the round table, we see that at many times we come with certain new assumptions which are going to be helpful, or certain new objectives are basically coming in the end. So, your objectives are reformulated, and that helps, because that ultimately your objective is to have a good model which should give you the proper results. So, it is important that the interaction with key personnels should be there in between. Apart from that, you have to do something so that the interest and involvement of manager in the problem is maintained. As we discussed that he is the one who can give the maximum suggestions, he can give maximum inputs, and he can only assess the results which is going to come out. So, you have to do necessary to maintain the interest and involvement of manager in the problem, because his knowledge will help towards validity and credibility of the model. Maintain assumptions document and do the structured walkthrough. So, as we discussed that for increasing the validity and credibility, there should be readable assumptions which should be ready for the engineers and managers. So, every time you are going to analyze any output performance measure, any result, you must be able to refer that what are the assumptions on which we got certain results. What and why for any assumption should be clear. Any assumption which has been taken, what are these assumptions? What for this assumption mean to, and why this assumption is required, why it is necessary. So, reason for them must be clear. So, it should be any time whenever we have the structured walkthrough, then that time the assumption document should be ready, and at every stage you must have proper answer, so that you are able to tell that why certain assumption has been taken. What is the basically purpose of taking that assumption? If this assumption is not taken, what way your model results are going to be suffering? What way your output performance measures are incomplete about certain assumption? Many a times we take certain assumption only to make the model simple. So, that should be clear. So, all that answers should be ready in front of the subject matter experts, and if the assumptions are taken, what way it is going to affect, what will be its effect on the overall system behavior. Data summary should be there. You must have the data summary which should always talk about the results. So, whenever people feel the need to discuss about the data, that summary should be there. So, after every some time passes, after every stages, the data which we have got, that can be analyzed by the analyst, statistical analyst. All the types of statistical counters, they should be computed. They should tell that at this stage this is the result which is available. So, this will help towards the validity and credibility of the model. Structured walkthrough normally should be done at remote sites. So, preferably it is thought of doing at some remote sites, maybe in certain hotels, at some distant places from the normal working sites. The purpose is that when you are doing that, there should not be local disturbances. So, there you can focus more on all the documents which are going. You can discuss and deliberate on the results more and more, so that if you feel that some of the assumptions were left out or certain results are unrealistic, there can be more and more deliberations on that. Many a times when people are preoccupied with lot of work at a parallel, they have a lot of work, then because of the time constraint, people are not able to concentrate on the aspects of simulation like assumptions or input parameters or so. So, normally it is preferred that whenever you have to do this structured walkthrough, you try to locate a place which is at the remote site, and this basically helps in more concentrating on the other affairs of the program. So, that helps basically towards improving the validity and credibility of the model. Then comes that the model validation and model components validation should be done using the quantitative techniques. Now, in that basically we have come across the different types of statistical techniques, and you must use the standard methods of comparison. Suppose you have to estimate the parameters, you must have the proper ranges of the values at certain confidence level, that should be mentioned. So, rather than just looking at the behavior in a macro way, you must pinpoint these parameters, estimate, and then you should validate the model that okay, these are the performance measures which we are interested in, and we are getting these results for these parameters. So, that basically helps in coming to this conclusion that this model is valid and credible. So, parameter estimation using different statistical techniques are basically that way helping you to realize that yes, the model is basically standing at its point whenever we are trying to estimate these parameters. Choice of distribution. Now, whenever we are doing the modeling components are validated, then the appropriate choice of these distribution functions should be used, for which parameters, what kind of distribution functions are more suitable, we should be knowing about it. Level of details, what are the level of details at which we are interested in. So, that also should be there in the mind while doing the validation. We should check the resemblance of output data from actual system. So, basically we have to also see that how it looks, the output data which we are getting from the simulation and from the actual data, how much resemblance is there, how much they are having the similarity. So, this is important because ultimately this is the data which are going to be used. So, the resemblance of this data is that way, we must have that in mind. Animation, as we discussed that if you have these animation, now these animations basically to check these invalid model assumptions and increase the credibility of the model. So, during the animation many a times it becomes clear that the certain type of model assumptions were invalid. So, you can from there you can think of changing the assumption and further get the results. So, that result will be more credible in the eyes of the model developer or the managers. So, these are the ways by which you can increase the validity and credibility of the model developed. Thank you.